Money doesn't just come from one place. It drips, trickles, flows, and floods into our lives in different ways. Welcome to Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood, a podcast that explores the power of multiple income streams. We've got merch. That's right. Drip, Trickle, Flow, Flood t-shirts are officially here, and they're as comfy as they are conversation starting. Grab yours at the link in our show notes. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Great. How are you, Melissa?
I'm doing good. I'm recovering from, I did my first, so this is only the second race I've ever done in my entire life, but it's the first one that I did 7 miles.
Oh, nice.
So I'm like in recovery today. I'm like, oof.
Which was it like was it a 7 mile race or were you part of a relay?
No, it was a 7 mile race. It was called the Chuckanut Foot Race. And I just signed up for it because after I did my 5K, which was my first race ever, I was really excited because I got third in my age group.
Nice.
Which, to be fair, there could have been like 10 people in my age group total. Like, who knows, right? But I was like on a high from it. So the next race available was this one, which was 7 miles. And I'm like, oof, because that's basically double a 5K, right? So I'm like, well, I can do it. I'll train. I had 8 weeks to get ready for it. And my
Nice.
only goal was to run the whole thing, which I accomplished.
Well,
So,
that's not for the faint of heart. I've done that race and you have to go up California Hill,
yes.
which is
Yes.
a beast. That
Yeah.
thing.
That hill almost took me out. The worst part is that it's halfway through the race. So
Mhm.
I think that was tough. That was a little tough because I felt like it was a little hard to recover after that hill. Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I gotta like really start moving now. And then I was like, oh, I can't. And so my jog was very light and pathetic at that point, but then it picked up. So
Yeah. No, that's that's a hard hill. Yeah.
I was telling my Gary, my husband, for those who are new listeners, I was texting him while I was waiting for the race to start because it was such a different environment than running a 5K. Because, a 5K, you have people who are there to run for time. And then you have lots of families and people with pets and strollers, and some are just going to walk. And right, it's very unserious. And this one I show up to, and everyone's in like, they've got their race gear, their compression garments. They're doing this warm up across it. We started at Marine Park, which is in Bellingham for anybody not who doesn't live here. And they're doing this warm up across there. And I was like, well, what's happening? Then this guy walks up to me and asks me what crew I'm with. I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, what crew? Like, there's different running crews. And I said, oh, none. I'm like, I'm a solo traveler here. And he's like, oh, that's so great. Like, good for you. And he was explaining that like a lot of people that do this race are training for the marathon in January. So they all have these like crews. And so then I'm like texting my husband. I'm like, there are run gangs. I'm like, how do I get into a run gang?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's a beautiful race though, right? You run up to
Yes.
Fairhaven, but then once you get on the trail, and then end at Larrabee Park, that's that's a nice race.
Yeah, it was beautiful scenery and the weather was really great. I mean, it was very overcast that day and in the
Yeah.
60s, so I feel like very lucky. But I think even if it was a little warmer, you're so shielded by the trees that that makes it nice. Because my 5K was in the beating sun on a farm, on an open farm,
Yeah.
which was a
Well,
very random kind of terrain, but it was, definitely the sun can make you tired. But I know you're a big runner, so
well, nice job. That's not, you can certainly find easier 7 mile races to run. So very cool.
thanks. Um, well, we have a good topic today. Hopefully not a bummer topic, but I think that the title might sound like a bummer, but we'll make it positive for everybody. So this is an article from Visual Capitalist. We will link it for you all, and it's called Mapped: The Salary Needed to Afford Rent Across America. So essentially, it's breaking down by state how much you will need in order to rent there. And of course, there are some big takeaways. That we'll kick off with, which is the average US renter now needs about $70,000 a year to afford a modest rental, which is pretty significant.
Yeah. The other takeaway from this right off the bat is that the houses that they use look like the houses from Monopoly, which is fantastic.
It totally does. Which well, and even the little man,
Yeah, even the
they
little
made a
man. Yeah.
they made a graphic, which you'll all be able to see, and I don't know why there's a Monopoly man and Monopoly homes on it, but maybe they were trying to make it look cheery or game-like, but
Uh,
whilst delivering really depressing information. Um, okay, so this is obviously I don't think this is probably a startling statistic to anyone because
oh, I mean,
I
I
think
feel
we
like
all
tenants
know.
have felt, rents rising. They've actually been, a little flat for the last year or two, I think, but they rose
Mhm.
sharply, from really 2019 through probably 2022 or so. And, that's lingering. I don't think wages necessarily kept up. And it's pretty crazy how, what the margin is here, right? The least expensive, which looks like West Virginia,
Yeah.
is, just over $39,000 a year. And then oh no, California is the most. And obviously this is going to vary by city, region, all the things, is 103,000. So you're talking triple uh the amount of money there, which is,
Yeah.
I guess, not quite triple, but close to triple, two and a half times. So it's wild that there's such disparity in the United States. And just, this doesn't show this, but I'm sure there's if you look at like wages versus rents in these areas, which we did discuss wages in a different episode. And if you just kind of like overlaid these maps, it would be interesting to see how that all played out. Um, but I think this is interesting. We've talked a lot about remote working, and if you're doing these multiple income streams, and maybe some of them can be done from different places and you can get jobs in different environments, it really does show you that if you have some fixed income types things, you can go choose different places to live and your dollar is just going to go way further.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was already looking up like cool places to live in Arkansas, in West Virginia, in Mississippi. Those are, I think, ranked as some of the lowest.
Well, and what's interesting is like Tennessee, which is towards the lower end, it's kind of in the middle, but
Mhm.
that's like a super desirable place to live right now.
Yeah.
And it's at $56,000 a year, where you look at, you know, our corner of the country, it's at 85,000, but you moved from California up here. Was that part of your decision at all when you were moving? Was just the
No.
cost of living?
Well, I guess a little bit. Um, it was less cost of living, so, like, meaning rent or being able to buy a house, um, and more just, California taxes.
Mm,
That was, like,
yeah.
the big thing, which could be, real estate taxes, of course, but, or property taxes, but I was looking more at, like, income tax, state sales tax, and business tax. It is extremely expensive to have a business in California. Um, and then also just like, random things, like, to when we had Gary's, van, for example, I think the registration for that was, like, almost $1,500 a year, and here it was, like, 90.
Yeah, well, and, we know here it's supposed to only be 35. We passed a state initiative, but the legislators said, "No, sorry, population, we're not doing that." Um, anyways,
I
yeah, but
mean,
there's
I'll take 90, but yes, I mean,
yeah,
of
but
course,
we're
it would
getting a
be
little
nice if
off
it's local.
track, but, there's a bunch of people that I think they register that live in California. I think they register their vehicles in Montana or something, and there's, like, a
Yeah.
big crackdown going on, but
There is a lot that goes on in California because it is so expensive to live there. There are lots of people who, register their businesses outside of state, who try to do all sorts of things, I think to make it more affordable. But ultimately, just the state itself is very expensive. So we moved here, but not necessarily to save money. And I'll be honest, like when I go to LA quite frequently and groceries there or, going out to eat is way cheaper there than it is here.
yeah, well,
Way
I mean,
cheaper.
we were in Disneyland in December,
Mhm.
and I was shocked that eating in Disneyland was no more expensive than eating in Bellingham, Washington, which was
Yeah,
shocking.
our area is very expensive.
But so if you're looking at this, hi, Lindsay, and we're
Hi,
podcasting.
Lindsay.
Do you want to come say hi? We're talking about rents across America. This is my wife, everybody.
To Disneyland?
Yeah, I'm sure I plan on moving to Disneyland because it'll be cheaper than here.
Let's all move to Disneyland.
So
But then we have California taxes, so
yeah.
maybe not.
Mhm. So looking at this map though, and I think people probably know this, but it's interesting, the closer you are to the coast, kind of the more expensive it is. The um the dark green in this map is kind of centered towards the middle of the country and this and the southern parts of the country. And it just kind of shows that I guess it kind of shows a little bit where people want to move, but it also shows where there's opportunity, which I think
Mm.
is a pretty cool. And I think you can look at this map in a few different ways. You can look at it as this is what I'm going to have to be able to afford. If I want to live in one of these places, if I'm going to move there and be renting. And I would assume that housing costs to buy a house is probably pretty correlated to this map as well. But it also, if you are wanting to get into real estate investing, it's also a useful map to kind of look and see um, where rents are. And again, this isn't going to tell you the whole picture, but it is interesting. And I think an overlay of this is that income. I think minimum wage is a very interesting thing to think about, right?
Yep.
If you look at California and Washington, I'm not really sure about Oregon or Massachusetts, New York, which are also pretty high. DC's high. Um, I don't know what their minimum wages all are, but I know that California and Washington have a state minimum wage that is significantly higher than the federal minimum wage, where
Mm.
some of these other may not. And so just understanding all of those pieces of our economy is it's really interesting if you're looking at investing or moving outside of where you currently are.
Yeah, I agree. I also hear a lot of talk when these kinds of things drop around the job market. So, like, not just what is being paid, whether it's minimum wage or higher, but just the general market. Because if you're not a remote worker and you're going to move to one of these very affordable places, I think sometimes the argument is, but there's no jobs here. Like there's just not like enough commerce, right? So yes, it would be nice to live here, but then where am I going to work? So I think that's another consideration for people, also as an investor too, right? So if you are wanting to invest in a property in this place, and the idea is that somebody's going to rent that property, well, it's also important to know the job market there because if it's pretty dead, like we hear that here in Bellingham, even that there is nowhere. If you're not a remote worker, there's really nowhere to work.
Yeah, and in our area has been very been really interesting because it is a desirable place to live, with the outdoors and the weather. Really, I would say the lack of volatility here. Yeah, it gets cold and rainy, and yeah, we have a couple hot days, but it's pretty mild, really. And there's no hurricanes, there's no tornadoes. We do get flooding, you know, at times, or certain places get flooding. So it is a desirable place to live, and we've had a lot of remote workers move in, which has really impacted the housing costs. But you're absolutely right. There aren't a ton of, high paying jobs in our area. It's really hard for people that grew up here or that even come to the area to go to college. It's tough for them to stay, um, which is interesting. And we have, I think, I don't know the numbers, but high amount of, retirees that have moved here that,
Yeah.
you know, they have a fixed income or whatever. So what stood out to you though, if you look at this map? Are there any places that were really surprising? Either that they were
I was actually surprised how much Florida must have increased because that's in what, like the top 10 most expensive.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, because I mean, I think sort of traditionally you would hear like move to Florida is
yeah.
as something a lot of people say, retire to Florida. I guess not so much anymore. And there are also, I guess, other considerations too, depending on where you go, that I was thinking as I was looking through this list. Like a few of these places might be cheap, but you might get snagged on home insurance because they have tornadoes.
Mm.
So there's like definitely things like that I was thinking. I know that's a big thing in Florida, although it seems to now be expensive in Florida with rent on top of the very hefty flood insurance that you'll need.
Yeah, we were recently in Florida, and having spent a little time in Miami, man, that town
Oh yeah.
is expensive. So I guess I wasn't as surprised by Florida. Tennessee is really one that surprised me at how inexpensive it was.
Mhm.
Just because I know so many people have been moving there. But I guess maybe that, I don't know what it was before. Maybe it has been climbing. Maybe it was, less. And then I guess Georgia, it has Atlanta, so maybe that's impacting it. But I guess I'm surprised that Georgia is higher than Tennessee. They're not like that
Mhm.
far apart.
Well, Georgia has the whole film industry.
That's true. I know that's
So,
been growing there. Yeah.
yeah, I mean they basically everyone left LA in like 2018. So so it's huge there. I mean, most productions are happening there, which means a lot of money being pumped into that state. So I feel like and a lot of people that need to live there because the only way you get the tax credits for filming in Georgia is if you hire, 98% of your crew on there. So like you can only have I think like one or two lead actors and like your writer and director come from outside of Georgia. Everybody else has to be local.
Interesting. Huh.
Mhm.
That's cool. I mean, it seems like, and that's probably opportunity for other areas. I don't know if other states have tax credits or stuff, but um
They
I
do,
was
they're just not they some do, but they're not as good. North Carolina does.
hmm,
So, I think that's, maybe we're seeing them rise a little bit. I think they're number 30 on this list. Um, yeah, there was kind of like I don't think anything was that surprising. I was interested to see Nevada, because I had heard I think there was a lot of new tech companies moving there. Some have already gone there, but, it sounds like there are others who are opening operations there, which is going to mean I think there's even a risk they're gonna run out of housing in certain areas, like Reno.
yeah, I've heard
So,
Reno has grown a ton. I've actually never been to Reno. But yeah, I
we have
know that.
a family member there, so we see them often, and it's been very interesting.
Yeah. Idaho is a little surprising to me that it's so low, and I know that
Mhm.
a lot of it's very rural. Boise has grown a huge amount, but it's interesting, its proximity to Washington and Oregon and even Utah. It's interesting that and Utah isn't much higher than, but it's interesting that these places can be so close yet still be so different.
Yeah.
They just live very differently.
Well, and, why I think Wyoming is maybe a little surprising that it's that low, only because I know so many people moving there right now. I mean, Wyoming is, I think, all around the number one state to move to for tax
Yeah.
incentives. So it's
And
like you have no state income tax, no state tax, no low property tax, no business tax. It's like it has everything. It's not like the top of all of those states that have, one or the other, no taxes.
yeah, and the
Um,
average and the annual income they say is 42,000 for renters. So that is definitely on
mhm.
the lower side of this scale. I agree. I thought Wyoming would be a little higher because Wyoming does have some pretty bougie spots to it, but it's a big state, and so there's probably, I guess there must be a large percentage of the population that is living in places that aren't as
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you drive, we've driven through it a couple times, and it is pretty dead. I mean,
yeah,
it's just like stretches upon like hundreds and hundreds of miles of nothing. It's beautiful though, and
yeah,
it's also
yeah. It's a beautiful state.
I think it's maybe the prettiest next to like Montana. Um, but I mean, you are going to get very harsh winters, and I know some folks are probably not a big fan of that. Also, the
Yeah.
Dakotas are very I mean, there's a big incentive. Lots of people open their business in South Dakota. I know that. That's a really popular one. But again, that's number 50 on the list. So I guess but there probably just isn't maybe a whole ton going on there.
Yeah. And this is, I guess we probably should have said this at the beginning. This is for a two-bedroom rental and spending no more than 30% of your income on rent. So that's defined as affordable. So, I guess if 30% of your income being spent on rent, I guess that's all up for debate. So what do you think people should do with information like this, right? We preach education. We think that that's such a big part of, getting financial success. What do people do with information like this?
I think it depends on your goals. Everybody's going to be a little bit different, but obviously, if you are someone who is saying, well, I'd love to stretch my dollars farther and move to somewhere that is lower cost. This can be a great place to do that. Although, like, heed our warnings that we said earlier, different things like what's the job market like there? What is, are there other types of, are there other costs involved, like insurance, for example, that are going to upend what you're saving on the rent? Now, if your goal is to invest, then like you said earlier, Tony, then this is a great list to look at to maybe spot some places in the middle. So like what are those like 20 like what's ranked 25 to 35 or something and see, hey, is there something there that's rising that maybe you want to snatch up a property that could get, really great rent in that area. Who knows, but it's a good thing to peek at. Um and I just think overall, it's good for everybody to be mindful of just trending wise. Like, I mean, it's just look at the top 10 and everything you're seeing like the West Coast, California, Hawaii. Hawaii's pretty obvious. But then a lot of the other stuff is concentrated around the tri state area. So you're having New York. So people live in New Jersey to commute to New York. So that's going to raise up the price of living there. Lots of people work in DC. So then you're going to live in Maryland to commute over there, most likely. And then, of course, we have like the Boston area. So it's just good, I think, to know like where everything's concentrated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think. I'm the one that always sends you these. I like the visual that visualizing capital gives you. For me, it's a very interesting way. It would be hard to just like read this list and absorb or have many takeaways, in my opinion, where when it's actually kind of shaped like the United States and it's, has this very colorful visualizing the different levels. To me, it's easy to find things that stick out. And again, this is just, I think, just being engaged with the information and taking this and taking the annual salaries and just being aware of these things and understanding it, whether it's for investing or moving or just kind of understanding what the rest of the country is dealing with. I heard an interesting thing. Labor varies dramatically throughout the country for like construction project, but the materials don't necessarily. Maybe the wood does from state by state and some things like that, things that are more locally sourced or whatever. But, you know, things like an HVAC unit probably going to be pretty similar across the country, right? They're being mass manufactured in one spot and then shipped out. And maybe not just one spot, a few spots. But so it is interesting to see that those things that aren't regional, that are kind of national as far as an expense goes, someone in, Kentucky is going to feel some of those pains much different than maybe someone, in New York, where it's just a less percentage of their income. So I think just being aware of the national economics, whether you're investing in stocks or real estate or thinking about employment or where you're going to start a business or where you're going to market your business to, all of those things, just understanding the whole thing because, you know, even though it doesn't seem like it a lot of the time, we all are all in this together. And so
Mhm.
it does all interact and it's important to know what's going on in all
That's
parts of
true.
the
I like
country.
what you bring up about the business too, like starting a business, even if you live in that area. Um, I mean, I see this a lot where folks will start businesses in their community. Of course, they have like a full heart about it. They're going about it the right way, but maybe they were unaware in some cases of like what that's looking like. Like people are spending way more than 30% to afford just their rent. So now they're going to be spending less on XYZ. And if you're somebody that maybe inherited a home or, grew up with generational wealth or whatever your circumstances are that like you're not in a renter position, right? You maybe own your home outright for whatever reason, you may not be as in tune or need to be as in tune or think you don't need to be as in tune with what's happening in that area. Or if you're thinking of opening a business in a different state, it's think that's a smart way to go about this too, is like, what are people dealing with all over the United States when it comes to their living costs? And how might that affect what they're investing in elsewhere?
And just to be aware that, and I don't know where they pulled this number exactly from, but they're planning on people spending 30% of their income, right? So that's
Yeah.
a giant chunk. So that's just something to be aware of.
Mhm.
So,
Well, this was good. I hope everybody checks this out. Like Tony said, the visual is really the Monopoly visual. They clearly stole from Monopoly is actually very helpful to view all of this so it's not in like one big boring list. And again, just all about educating ourselves, which is what Drip Trickle Flow Flood is all about, that financial literacy. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews really help us to reach more listeners who also would benefit from these money conversations. And with that said, we'll see you next time on Drip Trickle Flow Flood. Thanks, everybody.